So kia ora, my name's Dave. We'll be running this session around job management options for manufacturing firms. And this is part of a series that we're doing for people that are using Workflow Max and deciding what to do. So the agenda for today is a quick update on what's happening with Workflow Max, a dive in a bit deeper into what are the requirements for manufacturing firms. Remember, this is following on from our session that we did around professional services firms, and professional services firms are very different to manufacturing firms. One sell time, one sell or make cool things that combine time and items. And then we're lucky to have Tony on the call from Workguru, and we're going to spend some time in Q&A, not a demo, you can do that later on, around what is Workguru and some of the benefits that it provides. So as I said, my name is Dave, and we've got Tony Harcourt here from Workguru. That's a lovely photo there, Tony.
In fact, I was younger and fresh-faced then. I was younger and fresh-faced, mate.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So welcome. Just a bit of a background, Tony. What's your background?
Thanks for having me, Dave. Yes, so I'm a software engineer by training, which is nerdy enough, but spent 10 years in the Xero ecosystem doing cloud integration. So my co-founder, Michael Davis, and I had a consultancy called the Ripe Group, and we spent over a decade. Michael founded it in 2009. I joined in 2014, and we spent up till November last year implementing everything in the Xero ecosystem, from Workflow Max to Syn7 and Deer and GeoOp and ServiceMate and Receipt Bank and everything. And in 2017, we started building Workguru specifically for manufacturing and fabrication firms because we couldn't find anything that would handle the time and materials and the customization things well in the Xero space without having to push SMBs to an ERP style platform. So that's sort of where I come from and where we come from as a product.
Perfect, thanks. And that knowledge of Workflow Max in the past and other options in the future is great, because that's what most of our customers are deciding, hey, what do I do over the next 6 months? So let's drill into that a little bit and cover this, what is happening. So as you're aware, or I hope you're aware, in March 2023, Xero came out and announced that they were going to retire Workflow Max. And a part of that flow, they also said they would have sold the brand, not the product, to a company that's going to build a new Workflow Max. It's a completely different product from the ground up. That won't be available until early February for use, and you need to do something before, I think it's June 24th, I think it is, when Workflow Max will be turned off. So before you get worried a little bit about that, there's a couple of things. So what will happen to my data? So yes, you have to do something before mid-June 2024. Your data won't be deleted from Workflow Max, but it's going to be quite a complicated process to get data out of Workflow Max after that June date. So you're going to have to move to something. And you've got a couple of options around that, and a lot of that depends on your business. So option one is do nothing and wait until February and evaluate whether you stay with Workflow Max. Now, that's good for firms that are not keen to do any change, they're not interested in some new features and don't want to invest more. And then February, you can look at the new version of Workflow Max and the migration from that. Option two, which we're going to talk about in more detail here, is to review your options now with a look to making a change sometime between now and June. Ideally not in the last week of June, because it might be a little bit busy at that stage. And why would you want to do that? You want to look for some new features. So it gives you the flexibility to move when it suits, and it gives you another option as a backup if you think that Workflow Max 2 is not right for you. On the negative side of that, with most of the tools that you move to, there may be an increase in cost, but you get a whole lot of new features, and there's some change involved, and it's how much is that change going to impact your business. Now, if we think of Workflow Max itself and the requirements, and manufacturing firms, Workflow Max was I guess, quite a generic Swiss Army knife that could do a lot of things, but things got a little bit tricky in manufacturing, would be fair to say. Would you agree there, Tony?
Yeah, 100%. There's a bunch of complexity that it doesn't do well because it wasn't built for it.
Correct. It was built for a lot of things, but not necessarily that area. The analogy that I like to use in the manufacturing organization is that, look, you're selling a box, a magic box. You're not selling time and you're not selling individual widgets. But what's in that box? Inside that box is some time, Superman time, and some components. So you're bringing two things together, but I'm buying a box. I'm not buying Superman and the components within the box or the parts. I'm buying that final box, and that brings with it the complexity, but also some uniques in the manufacturing space. So you're selling a finished product at a fixed price. You've backed yourself into a fixed price engagement often, sometimes with a scope around it. And the time and materials are, I'm paying for those. So if it takes twice as long to build that box as I thought and scoped for, then that's on me. If the materials take twice the cost, unless there's been a change in the design of those and the client specifies they're to be gold plated, then the cost is still on me based on how I've contracted it. Very different to a cost up point of view. So what becomes important there? The scope and design are really important. Did you want a gold box or did you want one without gold plating? Variations become important, as we all know. As we design something, we change our mind. That's fine, but that impacts the cost and impacts you as the manufacturer. So there's these moving components that become hard to track within a job management system, or they're the uniques of the system. I quite like this diagram, which you might have seen. It may be a bit fuzzy, but how the customer wanted it versus what the actual customer got, and all the processes that you go along through that phase. I'll drill into these into a little bit more detail, and I'll bring Tony into some of this as well. So if we look at the three stages, quote and design. So in a normal manufacturing environment, and unless you're building to stock, so I'm talking more, I'm building to something that's usually pretty regular, but might have some variation. You'll have a quote and design where you'll price and scope it. Did you want that box to be gold plated or not in the components? You'll then manufacture it. And that brings in when you have to buy some widgets and issue purchase orders and all the rest of it. You're going to have time and you're going to have variations when Dave says he'd like his box bigger than what he chose to. And then finally, as you deliver it, and that might be in stages. There may be some variations where you need to invoice through, and you actually got to do some back costing to see whether you actually made money buying those things. Have you got any other comments in that space, Tony, sort of at a super high level?
Super high level, two things that I'd add. On your manufacturing phase, you can also use stock usage. So things that you've got in stock that you use on a regular basis that you want to allocate to that job. And the last one, back costing is it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I try and do real-time costing. If you're doing back costing and allocating stuff afterwards, it's a lag and it might be a little bit too late.
Completely agree. So if we dig into these in a little bit more detail, so look at the design stage. The time estimate's important. You're going to be focusing on the components, and that might be components that you're buying in or that you're pulling through from stock, and what you think your margin is going to be based on that. You don't want to design and price something that's going to cost and lose you money. You probably don't want to do that. And again, in that manufacturing stage, so this is where you get that scope creep, that components order, or you're absolutely right, bringing it in from stock. A lot of firms will progress invoice at this stage. And remember, if we go back to that box analogy, I, as the customer, are not buying 5 hours of Mary's time and 3 widgets. I'm buying a finished box. I might be okay to pay 25% of the price of the finished box. That's fine. But so you'd be invoicing in that manner as opposed to 3 hours of time and some components. So remember, you want to show the finished price, and hopefully there's profit in there for you as the manufacturer, or there should be. And then the delivery stage. So those final invitations, variations, and did we make money? And I completely agree. Ideally, you want to find out whether we made money or not made money during the process, not at the end. So there's some areas in here that can be inefficient, and there's some opportunities for some efficiency gains. The pains that we usually see are around procurement. Have we captured all those costs into a job, whether it be time and costs? Pet peeve on this is this double handling. Are we buying something, getting a receipt, issuing a purchase order, pulling it from stock, entering it into Xero, entering it into here, and lots of double handling. And yes, there's going to be some work involved in buying components for a job that is just what it is, or pulling from stock. But the more time you can save in this, you're going to save both time and accuracy as well, and bring through. And I think that's probably interesting, Tony. If I talked about back costing at the end, but I guess if you can be quicker in this process, you're going to get some real-time costing, because
Yeah,
you're going to be able
100%.
to move quicker in there. And variations. Are we over-delivering to our cost? So just moving forward here, last slides before we jump into a bit of Q&A around Workguru. Looking at that in a manufacturing business, so this is normally the process we see with those that are using Workflow Max: is quote and estimate, it's delivered, job setup. There may be some scheduling in that space, maybe not, depends on how things are working. The resourcing, so just making sure you've got time to do that. You start using the purchase order functionality. Jobs underway, and customers may be using some estimated billings and managing those costs, and then invoicing through to job closed. But there's a few things that happen outside Workflow Max, which I think are quite important, because this is your opportunity to bring some feature flows through into your job management tool. So most firms I see have a job board, which is physically that, a whiteboard with what's in where, and that's something that you can bring through into a digital format in the right job management tools. Estimation, there's pros and cons in that. It depends on how complex it is. We still see quotes and estimates done up in Excel, which gives you that flexibility, but you can also bring some of that through into your job management system there. And the final one is pet peeve, is the purchase order process, and whether those purchase orders and the receipt of them and the payment of them, whether that's driven from a Xero type transaction or a job management type transaction. What else do you see in this space, Tony?
Those are the main things. For manufacturing firms currently using Workflow Max, the other thing that happens entirely outside of the job management system is stock control. They either don't have it, or it's an Excel spreadsheet, or it's a third-party system, or it's a lick your finger and put it in the air and guess how much you've got. But yeah, that's one of the big ones. It was one of the reasons that we built Workguru to start off with.
Perfect, excellent. So, and there's pros and cons on bringing, definitely with stock, but with estimation and purchases, there's pros and cons on bringing them through into the job management system with Xero. But you want them to be able to talk, because we want to go back to, remember, there's that efficiency gain that we had. So look, there's some new features that are available now. So most of these won't be available in the new Workflow Max. I think that's probably quite important to realize, is the Workflow Max you have now will be the Workflow Max that's available in June. There'll be no other magic buttons to make life quicker and easier. That is what it is. So if it's not working for you now, it won't be working for you perfectly in June either. And this is an opportunity to make that change. So multi-currency becomes important if you're bringing through payments, bringing through and purchasing things from outside of New Zealand or Australia. Being able to import payments back in from Xero, so that synchronization is really important around purchase orders. And we see some payment automation, scanning of purchase orders. Payroll becomes really important. And one of the cool things, and we'll jump into some of these features in a tick, is the job completion forms, the other stuff that becomes part of your process, because normally there's a job card and a sign off and other things that we see in manufacturing. So from there, I'm going to step through into some of the key features that I like in Workguru, but I'm going to bring them up, and Tony and I are going to have a chat around them. So I sort of see the key things that are different in this list. The dashboard, and I'm going to go through and show these, and we'll talk through them. So the stock management, is it stock, inventory, same thing, is it?
Same thing as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Cool. Forms. So what I mean by forms there, I will get to it in a second. And then purchasing, scheduling, and variation management. So it's got a really nice configurable dashboard, which is really cool. So we're looking at just some screenshots here of Workguru. I've hit the button that allows me to move the dashboard, and I can configure the view on my screen to what I want. And for the amount of times that I've been asked, can I move this there, and this there for various people? This gives people the ability to lay it out however they want in that space. Anything on that area that you like there, Tony?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So this is a customizable dashboard per person. So your admin staff obviously might each want to see a different thing. So you might have your operations manager with one set of dashboard widgets and graphs and reports on their front page, and you might have the managing director who wants to see something completely different, and warehouse manager with something completely different again. So you can set the dashboard, and I think there's about 45 widgets available that you can customize on your dashboard, and we add more all the time. You can set those, any combination of those and any layout for each of those people. But then also for your end users who you just want to be able to see their data, their timesheets, their, the tasks that they're working on at the projects they're assigned to, you can actually set a default dashboard for everyone else as well. So you can customize it for as much as you need it as a management and executive level. And then your end users, you can literally just give them a snapshot of what's important to them as well. So as you said, this is one of the things we got requests for all the time. So it's a pretty popular feature, this one.
Now, one feature that's completely different is this forms area. So, yes, in Workguru, you can have a task and some to-do items that you check off around that task. So it might be, I don't know, service a car and make sure I've put the wheels back on. And that's for those that use Work for Max, they're familiar. You can do the same in Workguru. But the form is quite neat because maybe you've got a process where you need to then have somebody else check and sign that Dave's put the wheels on and tightened them up correctly. But just tell me a little bit more about this form and where it's used and etc. Tony.
Yeah, so forms in Workguru are a combination of questions with different answer types. So as you can see on this one, there's a combination of date, drop-down list, text box, a signature, and you can even add pictures, numbers, photos that you upload, and even custom tables that you can embed there. And it's a combination of those questions and then a PDF or a Word document that we embed those answers in to give you the pretty form. And they're used everywhere from customer sign-off on acceptance to quality assurance. So quality assurance checklist, going through those individual things, to delivery dockets getting signed, to job safety analysis or Take 5 analysis to say, I've checked the hazards and I'm not going to kill myself while I'm doing this job. And the cool part about that is when they're filled, it automatically adds the time-stamped PDF with a log of who filled it out and when to the project that it relates to. So it's always there and you can refer back to it without having to go through a third-party system as well.
So I get the form thing for health and safety, etc. I'm working for the firm and I pull out my computer or I presume a tablet or phone and fill some stuff in. But are you saying just like a courier driver, hey, here's the thing you need to sign for it? You can also bring the customer into that workflow as well?
Absolutely. We do a lot of that and we can do delivery dockets. If you're working on a customer's site, we've actually got the ability for them to sign off on timesheets and embed those in the forms and everything as well. So they're very flexible and they can really be used for whatever you need.
So that analogy with the car that came in, I've serviced it, I've signed off, got my supervisor to see that the wheels are put on properly. I could then have another form that I give to the customer to say, car's looking great. I'm heading out the door. Perfect. So
Absolutely.
You've got this 360 within it. And I would imagine that these forms probably already exist in manufacturing firms, but sit outside of the job management system. So when you need to go back and the customer says, hey, I don't know, there was a scratch on my car when it was serviced, or when this thing that I've bought, the magic box, has been purchased, and to find the sign-off form, it'll be sitting somewhere else, not related to the job, which would be pretty tricky. So that's quite a strong, unique position, I think. Production jobs or jobs for stock, or how you build something that is a combination of a variety of items. So let's come back to the magic box, and within it there's a widget that has got 3 or 4 things that make it up. But yeah, talk to me about this, Tony.
Happily. Hilariously enough, we actually built production jobs for a box manufacturer. No joke, a cardboard box manufacturer was the reason that we did this. I know, you didn't even know that. But production job is exactly the same as a project. So a Workflow Max job is a Workguru project. A production job is a project internally, but instead of invoice outputs, the things that is the result of a production job is stock that goes on the shelf. And so we have people that use this if you're making sub-assemblies for trailer manufacturers. They might make wheel and suspension assemblies, or they might make a chassis, or they might make, mud guards, all of those kind of things. And the output of that job is, the mudguard that goes into stock, and that might take components off the shelf. It might take staff labor. It might take third-party purchase orders, including whether it's galvanized or dipped or whatever it is, the process that you're doing to it. And then it will put it into stock at the value that production job cost you. So from an end user point of view, it's exactly the same as a project. I add materials to it, I add my timesheet to it, and I add purchase orders to it in exactly the same way. It's just when we finish, we don't invoice, we put things into stock.
And so if you're a kitchen maker, wardrobe maker, a manufacturer, you've got different modules. You could be sitting making those up in the warehouse, or quoting them based on 4 or 5 different modules which you built from stock.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Now, the magical world of stock or inventory. Just and I know we could spend hours in here, and we're not going to. But obviously, when I added something to a job, let's start this again. For a lot of manufacturing firms, they will buy bulk quantities because they get a deal on them, and then they have the challenge of, where do I attribute that cost and put it across various jobs? So tell me a little bit about the stock area.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the process that you just described, you'd raise a stock purchase order. And so, in the screenshot that we've got there, we've got some examples of steel as an example. And they might be buying in bulk loads of steel that goes into stock. And the way that we account for that is that goes onto the balance sheet, and into the stock on hand. And then when it comes to use it, there's whether it's the kiosk or the tablet or the mobile app or through the web application, you hit a button that says use materials, and the use materials is the thing that takes it out of stock, so reduces the number that you have available on hand, and then also allocates the cost of that stock, the particular stock that you used, to the job that you're working on. So it's a very intuitive system, and it lets you allocate that bulk purchase across multiple jobs as and when you use it as well, but also be able to see how much you've got, how much you need, what's coming in the door, and how much it's costing you for it all.
And that keeps the accountant happy by moving stuff off the balance sheet into OPEX costs per job, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. And it accounts for it properly, particularly if you're a larger manufacturing firm that has those requirements to use perpetual inventory.
Perfect. So this is your opportunity for small manufacturers that perhaps are on WorkFirMax and didn't have stock. This allows you to step in and correctly account for purchasing in bulk, which is probably what you do already on some areas. I know we saw a lot of that in COVID period of time. It wasn't bulk. It was great. I can get it. I need it now. I'm just going to buy a lot of it.
Buy everything.
Because I know that So it allows you to do that and account for it correctly. I think the last area, and I'm sure there'll be a few more that we can jump into, but the last area that I'm quite interested in is the purchasing flow. So this is back to the magic box. I need some components. I issue a purchase order to somebody. What happens from there in Workguru land?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of different types of purchase orders. So if we're buying the magic box, we might be raising a couple of different purchase orders to make that. And we might raise a purchase order for the cardboard sheet to one particular supplier and bring that into stock. We might then raise a purchase order for stickers to go on that box, as an example. And that would be just a purchase order on the job, because it's just for that job. And we actually account for those two different purchase orders differently. The stock purchase order comes to the balance sheet, and the sticker purchase order, because it's part of a job, it's expensed straight away. But from the user flow, there's no difference. We raise a purchase order, we send it to the supplier, and when we get the goods, we receipt the purchase order and the invoice, if we get the invoice at the same time. And then all of that purchase order process is handled inside Workguru. And if you're buying your cardboard from overseas, as an example, you might be buying in a foreign currency, and you might also have to pay international shipping and customs, and account for the cost of getting those goods into your box manufacturing plant before you even know how much the cardboard truly cost you to land, as an example. So all of that's handled through the same user interface in Workguru. It's just a couple of options, whether you pick that it's a stock purchase order, it's a project purchase order, or whether it's a freight or landed cost purchase order. And it's purchase, receipt, and invoice all in the same system.
So what happens when Johnny goes out and buys some gold paint for that box and it just lands up as a cost in Xero and you're going, what is this gold paint? Do you need to, because I see this as a frustration, some people, you kind of need to, in Work4Max, and you got to go back into Work4Max, issue a job, purchase order come through. Is there, just tell me about that link between Xero and Workguru.
Yeah, we have what we call the Xero expense reconciliation tool. So if there's an accounts payable bill that ends up in Xero that's not in Workguru, you can actually go to our expense reconciliation screen and map that expense back to the relevant job. So you don't need to double enter it. You ask Johnny what this gold paint was for, and he'll say it was job number 123. And you, from the list, you just map it back to job number 123. It's like doing a bank rec in Xero,
Yep.
But it's an expense rec to a job in Workguru.
Yep. And are there some scanning features as well? So you needed to know the job and the details of that gold paint, and you've just got this invoice. Because I think this is the area that there's a huge amount of time saving available.
Yeah, so you can use HubDoc and Receipt Bank with the Xero expense reconciliation and map it back from the Xero side of things. The other one that we actually have a stronger integration with, simply because they've got a publicly available API, is Easy Bills. And we've actually recently, Easy Bills is like HubDoc or Receipt Bank. So it does the receipt scanning and purchase order mapping, all those kind of things. We've actually just built their scanning tool into our phone app. So if you've got the Easy Bills integration, you can take a photo of that receipt at the hardware store onto the job. Easy Bills will extract the data, push that back onto the job, and send it through to Xero for you. So no double entry whatsoever.
Awesome. That sounds great. So I think this is an area where, purchasing stuff, well, I don't think it's that exciting, but it's a huge opportunity to save some time, because it's a lot of paper going back and forward or process. And this is where you get the accuracy on the back cost. And Johnny's gold-plated, Johnny bought gold-plated paint as opposed to gold paint, and there's a different cost. You want to know that earlier so you can get it into your, you don't want to find it out in back costing once the product's actually moved through. Any other areas? We could spend hours in these features, but is there any that I've missed in here that's sort of at a high level? What have we talked about? Dashboard, stock management, forms, purchasing. We haven't talked a lot about scheduling or variation management, which both are a bit of a science in their own. Any comments in that area, Tony?
Scheduling, there's three different ways that we support scheduling. So you've got your traditional Gantt chart scheduling for the project, and then the tasks within a project. So you can have a look at sort of your overview of the work that's happening in the shop or in the field at any particular point in time through your Gantt chart. The second one that we have is the staff task scheduling. So when you assign a task to a staff member and it has a date, it just gives you a view over who's got how many jobs on over what period of time. And one of the things that we've been asked for constantly, which we just released last month, is calendar-based scheduling. So hours in the day. So inside Workguru now, you can actually go, I want Johnny to be manufacturing, doing the setup of that box manufacturer from 10 till 12 on Monday, and then 1 till 3 on the afternoon he's doing the production run, and then 3 till 4 he's painting it. If you want to go to that level of detail and scheduling, you can. We tend to see that less in workshops, but more if the workshop is manufacturing something and then has a field service team to go and do warranty or things like that. So you can use the scheduling and the calendar scheduling just for the field service team if you need to, and that integrates with your Google Calendar or your Outlook calendar, Office 365 calendar, just via an RSS calendar feed as well. So you can subscribe to that as well and have that sync through to either of those and or to the mobile app.
Cool. Perfect. That sounds like it's useful not just for manufacturing, but for any type of organization. And there'll be some overlaps here. I guess in this, we're not Workguru will work across a variety, which we're focusing on manufacturing needs at the moment, but there's some other areas that you could work on in that space. Okay, perfect. So just sort of to close out, how do I decide, what I want to do from here? And look, there's no identical replacement for what you've got. The old Mini is very different to the new Mini. But think about your current usage, what your process is, your volume of your work activity, because that's going to find your efficiencies. And do think about what you're doing outside of Workflow that you can bring in, because that's where the win is happening. And is there a change in your market as well? Is there something that you can see is changing or will change that will impact how you charge, cost, or an opportunity? So those are the areas that I'd be focusing around during that process. your current usage requirements will probably drive your future ones. So Mr. Bean here probably needs a bigger car at this stage. And as much as, you know, you might have a sports car, it might be time for the family wagon based on what you need in that space. What can you do now? Thinking about document those processes and your flows, identify any efficiencies, that becomes your requirements, and then identify areas that you can't do now. That might be stuff outside of Workflow Max, it might be stuff that you're doing completely elsewhere. That becomes your nice to haves, but also your return on investment of moving into a different tool. What we can do from Ripped Orange's perspective, so we've got over 10 years experience in Workflow Max and job management systems in general, but read our blogs, go to our site, Ripped Orange Workflow Max, and you can join our user group. We can arrange some demonstrations, documentation, and training to help you move through. And that's really what I wanted to end with. Have we got any specific questions from those in the audience? I'm just going to turn the recording off now.